Hello there, I'm George of Pavliscak Studios, and I'll be making a glass marble today. I'm going to make a letter marble using my wisp technique. It looks like this. You can see there's a bunch of different letters in there. All the same letter G, but sort of floating and swirling around. Today we're going to do a P. Similar to that. Let's get things adjusted here. Alright. I'm going to get a frame of reference with my torch. Tiny flame. Whoa. That's interesting. Okay, I think that's going to do it. So, glass rods I'm using are going to be mostly clear. This is Moretti glass. It is a lead crystal type glass. I'm going to be using some threads that I pulled previously for other marbles. There's one I was making monster eyes with a few weeks ago. I actually made a bunch more of those because I have a group of those coming out, but no, let's go for some solid colors. We're going to go for some blues and greens, and it'll be essentially layers of clear, a letter, layer of clear, letter. Once I get the design made, I'll use hemispherical graphite marble molds to start shaping the marble into a sphere. When I get close to the final shaping, I have a cherry wood marble paddle that is always kept in water. It's a cherry board. It's got a series of holes drilled into it. And you spin the marble in each rim mold for just a few seconds before moving on. And that chills the surface slowly without putting any ripples in the glass, but makes the surface firm as it cools it without cracking it. So let's pick out a few more colors. Light blue, dark blue, and we'll do light green and dark green. We'll do a capital letter P, because then that could be a D upside down or a B backwards. So multi-purpose. I'm going to use some protective eyewear. In person, I need these to filter the sodium flare from the glass. You guys don't need it because sodium flare can't come through the camera onto your screen. It'll just look like a slight yellowish tint to the flame to you guys. Now, just looking for my spark lighter. Start the propane first, and then add oxygen, and get a balanced flame. Cleaning any dust and carbon bits off the tip. Because I don't want that soot to come loose as I'm jiggling around and get in my glass. Most of this marble will be clear, so I'll be getting most of my big gathers from these large diameter clay rods. The first thing I need to do is flash this rod to bring it up to temperature. So this will take about 30 seconds to a minute of flashing. Then when it gets up past about 500 degrees, I can leave it more in the flame and let it start to get a gather. I'm going to get a large gather, and then I'm going to flatten it on a graphite plate I have next to me that is called a Marver plate, or just a glassworking tool. You can use steel, you can use graphite. I use graphite when I'm torch working because I want to take heat out of my glass more quickly. If you want to go more slowly, I can use my actual torch head, which is a hot piece of steel. So it draws very little heat out of the glass and can reshape things. But that's only for very tiny stuff, because the surface area of that is only about that big. My rod is hot. hot enough to go into the flame. It's not getting a gather yet, but it will soon. And on these, when I'm starting a new rod, a lot of times the end has a lot of little fractures in it, and those fractures will translate to scum or white film over the surface of the clear glass. And so here's my opportunity to come in with tweezers and just peel that off as the glass becomes molten. I can grab that with these stainless steel tweezers. The tweezers have to be on the cool side. I can grab the hot glass and then I go right into the water that I have next to me for that very purpose. If I were to try to get 2 grabs in a row of the hot glass, it would just bond to the surface of this stainless steel because the glass is just so hot. I'm not in danger of melting the stainless steel because the temperature, the melting point of this is about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Alright, now you can see that my gather is starting to gain some mass and become larger than the diameter of the rod. And if I hold it straight, it starts bending down because of gravity. So it's getting kind of cool there. Let's get it going again and get it a little bit bigger. I'll show you that one more time. When the glass gets really hot and orange in the flame, you can see it's pretty orange hot there. This is when I can see all the imperfections in the glass, all the impurities. They really show up. It's a slight color change. And so I can go in there and just grab those and get them out so my glass gather is nice and clean. Because when we make this marble with the letters, we want to see the letters, and we don't want to see the bubbles and the scum and stuff. Yeah, sometimes you might want to see where a layer is put in. In this letter marble, I'm actually going to add some UV glass so that there's an invisible letter that you can only see under UV light. But that might, since the UV glass is kind of clear but a little bit on the bubbly side, you might see that as some imperfections in the glass under normal daylight conditions. Alright, I'm going to turn my torch up a little bit because this gather is taking quite a while to get going. Although it is getting nice and hot, you can see how smushy it is and how it wants to flow. I'm going to hang it perpendicular to the surface of my marver plate and let it get flat. I'm not going to press it flat like I'm making a disc to decorate for flowers, which you see me do probably once a month if you watch these demos. Those flowers are my favorite. But I'm just using gravity to flatten out that ball on the end of the rod to a disc. Now I'm going to add my first letter, and so I'm doing a P. I'm going to turn down the torch and take this green thread that I've made in advance and do a P. And I'm going to do them all so they're forward facing for me. They'll be backward facing for you. And they'll be backward facing from one direction on the marble. So I need to get that letter that I just drew on there to pull into the surface of the glass. So I want to melt it in without it losing its sharp edge. So I'm going to heat it up, press it in, and there, that made it. And I put it back in the flame and it became one with the surface of the disc. Now I'm just going to keep it warm in the back and get a new gather with my clear rod. We're going to put a layer of clear over that first P, and then we're going to do that a few more times so that we have a bunch of letter P's in this letter marble. Once we have all those layers done, we're going to give it a light twist. Give it a sense of motion. And maybe a sense of being trapped in a sphere. And because I think that looks cool. Alright, so my next gather is getting ready. I think what I want to do for the gathers here is not so much try to make them big or small or rush them. I want to make sure that they're all about the right size, the same size I mean, not the right size. Any size you do is the right size. But I want to be the same size for this marble as I go across. And there, you could make like little ones at the beginning, going to big ones in the middle, and then little ones at the end if you want. It's kind of a cool idea. Alright, so now I'm just going to orient my pea up. I'm going to draw my next pea over top of it, so that it's in a layer of the same, like a congruent shape on a different plane. Alright, so there I've drawn my next pea. See the light green one behind it, and there's the dark green one. I'm going to melt that into the surface and get my clear rod heating up again. Alright, so that pea is melted into the surface. And the reason I want the peas, or any letter, or anything I'm doing melted into the surface, is that when I put my next gather on, I don't want it to trap air. Anytime there's a surface and a bump and a surface, in those little corners at the bump is where air is going to get trapped. Especially if you're just pressing one thing into the other. There's other ways to chase air out without flattening that. If you had like a detail that you wanted to preserve, but you wanted the glass to get in around it, there's several different ways you can go. You can get your gather very hot and have the detail portion that may have some 3D elements to it. Hot, but cool relative to the gather of the glass that you're going to add. And then as you push the hot glass over the detail, you keep in mind the detail that you want to cover, and then you sort of move quickly, like within a second, to cover that area. There's also some vacuum encasement methods that you can use, and those are fun. I don't know, it would be difficult to explain that without drawing pictures or without having the apparatus by. But if you've seen, here goes the layer. If you've seen me do like encasement of dichroic sheet glass, a lot of times I'll push the hot gather in, and then I'll push in one direction to move air out, and then I'll pull back along the other direction past the juncture where I first inserted the gather, so that I'm pushing air up to the top and then down to the bottom and then separating off. It's hard to know if that was understandable. But I'm going to do a dichroic marble next week and show that. Inspiration. I haven't done a dichro marble in a while. Alright, so we've got our 2-letter P's stacked up. Now we're going to do, those are light green, dark green, so let's do light blue, dark blue. Oh, you know what? I'm going to make my invisible UV letter in the middle and then go to blue. So I'm going to mirror that P over the green peas. Green peas. And I've melted that glass in there. Wow, it's going to be difficult to see. You can see it there, in relief a little bit. But I'm going to melt that right into the surface again, so our next gather goes on without trapping air. So I'm flattening that out. Let's start heating up my next clear gather for the rod. So flattening stuff out, I like to use a combination of pressing and melting things into the surface. You can just melt it in, but you're going to soften the detail of the edges. You can just push it in, but you're not going to get any spreading or thinning of the edge, which I like. It will be essentially a slug that's pushed into the surface. I love that razor edge where the clear meets the opaque color. And then especially when you twist it and you look off at the side, it looks almost like it could disappear if you just twisted it at the right angle. So the less glass that you actually use, the less color glass, the more you're going to get that effect. There are certain opaque colors that will take stretching and using in a rarefied manner without washing out. And there's you can also mix colors to stabilize them for that. And the short answer is white. The opaquing agent in white is what will stabilize your color. Alright, so there's the next layer of clear glass. And you see, it's like boop, 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 little donuts. Now I'm going to put my first blue pea. I'm going to turn my flame down to a little point so I can draw. Since this thread is so easy to melt, I don't even have it in the flame. It's like just right next to the flame. So if this was the flame, it would just be right in on the edge, and it would be melting as I went along the side. So there's the pea that I've drawn. A little bit lumpy where I attached and detached. So my first step is to melt those together. Once they're melted together, so that they're not a separate entity anymore, got too cold, I'm going to press it on my marver plate just to even it out. There we can see the sun sticking out a little bit. Now I'm going to heat it so that it pulls in all the way. Heating my clear rod for the next gather. So as soon as this surface of the pea is merged into the surface of the clear, I can put that in the back flame. And I'm getting my next clear gather. And I'm getting ready to make my last letter. It's actually 5 layers of letters that we've done so far. So when we're ready, this is pretty common to have these large rods crack as you start heating them. So if you see me switching hands around and grabbing around at this thing with a tweezer, it's because a air bubble got trapped when it cracked and then resealed. And I like to pull those out, especially on marble where they're mostly clear like this. Moretti and softer glass takes a little extra patience to get clear. It's very easy to burn. It's very easy to trap air. The viscosity can go from too firm to too soft very rapidly. I'd be interested to know what the ratio is of new glass workers who are just all doing borosilicate stuff since they have such nice colors now. I'm trying to hold both in one hand here. There was a big bubble in there I'm going to get out. Alright, let's get back into business here. Alright, I got those. A little hectic there for a second. We figured it out. Oh man, there's more bubbles in there. I'm going to leave them. Because this is a demonstration after all. You don't want to see me picking bubbles for the next 5 minutes, do you? Alright. This gather is a little bit too hot almost, so I'm going to back it off a little bit. You can see it was like, that's more like it right there. If it's falling too fast, it's too hot. You can see by the color to where you are with heat. So, dripping that right down on that light blue pea, separating it, and then press it flat. There it is, another clear donut. Do my black, no, my dark blue letter, my last one. And you can see I've got the last point where I pulled off is kind of lumpy. So I'm going to heat that, press it flat. Oops. And melt it flat. The last P. Press it a little bit flatter. Alright, so there's all of our layers. There's 5 layers of P in there. Look at that. It's like an infinity mirror. Holy crap. I'm going to put my last gather on there and then probably add a little bit more glass to balance out this end to that end. And I got to get back in the flame because I don't want it to get too cold. And that's the structure of the construction? Yes, the structure of the construction. And then after that, I'm going to start shaping it into a sphere. About halfway. Then I'm going to put in my twist. Then I'm going to finish up shaping the sphere. So I've got a lot of glass to keep hot there, and I can start increasing the temperature a little bit. So all those little donut layers are going to start merging together as I let the heat pick up. Since I'm done putting all the layers together, I can start merging them. And rather than finishing all the gathers, then merging it, I can start merging these layers together and increasing the heat of the marble as I go. Just because I've done this process a lot. If you're thinking about doing some of these techniques, you can go as slow as you want. Do one thing. You can always, if stuff seems like it's going too fast and you're out of control, just go farther out in the flame. Take a step back. Gain control what you're doing. Then move on. Or step on the gas, go crazy, and see how it turns out. That's always fun. Because sometimes artistic expression is about breaking stuff and wrecking things. I like that too. Let's break stuff. But creatively, we'll paint our hammer purple and then hit stuff. Oh, getting excited. Alright, back to the marble. That'd be fun. This is the stacked layers technique is really something that works well with soft glass. You can't do it with some other types of lamp working. And for glass blowing, it's difficult to add such small amounts in succession like that. I'm not going to flatten the last gather because I'm going to start rounding that end. But I love this, the stacked dots of mini gathers, trapping things in between layers and then manipulating those layers. I think that's so fun. And that really contributes to the idea that you have a sphere and you can make it look interesting from all the different angles you're looking at it from. And one of the things I also like to do is to make it interesting in different lighting conditions. So like in this one, I added some UV glass so that if you looked at this under a black light, you'd be able to see an extra layer of letters. I also have glow powder, which is kind of a ceramic-based thing, which when you have it charged with photons and you turn off the light, it will continue to sort of effervesce photons and glow in the dark. Which is nice. Then you can do your main design, and then on the side where you normally wouldn't do anything, you have like a whole new avenue to decorate. Like on my eyes, I have that whole different series of things that I can do along the back for a surface decoration that's almost as interesting as the rest of the eye. So there's all our layers of P merged together in a cylinder. Now I'm going to shape it. I'm going to go in a graphite hemisphere that's much bigger than what the diameter of the marble is going to be. And just give it a little bit of a push straight in, and then a little rotation. You can see I've improved the shape towards a sphere a little bit already. I'm going to do that one more time. Then I'm going to switch my handle from this giant glass rod that we started with to the stainless steel rod. Then I'm going to round the other side where the large diameter clear rod was attached. So starting in a larger marble mold hemisphere and then going to a smaller one where I'm just using the rim, I can actually make that quite spherical. It doesn't really matter in this case. I do it out of force of habit in this regard. Right now, we're not quite ready to determine the size or the perfection of the sphere of this marble because we got a little bit of work to do yet on this. So I'm going to heat up the end of this stainless steel rod until it's just starting to go yellow, and then I'm going to bore in to this clear surface. The glass was a little bit too cold. I'll try again. Alright, so that's welded into the surface. Now I'm going to melt this right here. The juncture between the large rod and the rest of the marble. So, I'll get it close and then I'll show you starting to bend. It's getting softer. It's melting. That's what we like. And melt it off. Now I'm going to heat it. There's a little push in from where I originally turned that gather on the end of the large clear rod into a disc, and it made a valley in the surface. So I'm going to use heat and rotation to let that surface of the glass pull together, pull that valley flatter before I start shaping it on this side. So you can see it's starting to pull in. Let's give it another 30 seconds and see what happens. You know, thinking about making a diacrylic marble next week, I don't even know if I have any ready diacrylic sheet that I can use for those marbles. I've been having trouble finding it in small amounts because I like to have different colors. And I can buy a whole sheet of the same color, but that's not as exciting. And a whole sheet is basically a 12-inch circle. And it's pretty pricey, like in the $120, $130 range. You could get quite a few marbles out of that, but that's only one color, so I'd have to get like 3 or 4 of those. Which would be okay if I could be selling out and about at the market, which is usually my strongest sales presence. Now I'm just on the internet. All right, look at that. All those letters. P. Let's see. They're stacked up. And then if you look at it this way, it's a D. So I want to give it a little twist in this direction. So I need to take this handle here and switch it up 90 degrees. But I can't just take this one off. So I'm going to add another one perpendicular to that. Then I'll take off the first one and put it on the same axis as the one I'm adding right now. And I want it to be on the right axis so that you can read the letters. So up and down as the letters go. So that's going to determine my attachment point. And so I welded that rod on. I'm going to melt this other handle off. And I just need to basically get that rod hot enough so that it lets go. But I want to pull a little bit of glass out with it. Probably too hot to see. It's messing with the lens. There we go. So you can see there's a little glass on the end of there. And I'll just toss it in the water. It'll chip off. I'm going to examine that little nub that was left. Right there. And my marble went a little crooked, so I'm going to straighten out the attachment point first. And then let that attachment point firm up. Alright, now I'm going to heat that nub because I think I see a little particle of metal in there from the stainless steel handle. So, yep. And so I went in there with my tweezers and grabbed it, and now I can push that little nub back in. See it? Nub right there, pointing at my eye. Oh. Let's flatten it and melt it into the surface. Now we'll grab that rod that I was using before as a handle. Grab it again. Ooh, look. There's the letters. Let's see that in there. Wow. Love that. Layers of letters. And there's an invisible one right in the middle of UV glass. Alright, so now I gotta heat up the whole marble. Because when I twist it, I want it to twist from the middle out, not just on the edges. Because if I, like I've talked about this before, controlling your heat when you're twisting a marble. If I just was to heat this, you know, not thinking about it, the ends are going to twist first where the attachment points are. I don't want that. I want to twist in the middle first. So I'm going to let the attachment points be cooler and get the middle hot enough to start moving. So kind of a waiting game. If I was to think about the flame as a hose shooting out water, I would be, and thinking about this marble as like a basketball, I'd be letting the hose of the flame spin the ball between my fingers. That's like the new equator of heat right in the middle. But you can see I'm going back and forth like this because I'm evening out the heat as I go. I don't want it to get crooked. And it is getting a little crooked. If you look at the shape of the marble, you can see on the side towards this hand, it's a little crooked. It's pulled out of sphere. And that's another indicator that your heat is not even. And it's because I'm talking so dang much. Alright, so Let's focus. Get this thing starting to turn. So I'm twisting with one hand and sort of just letting it pivot in the other hand. And every once in a while in that pivot hand, I'm going to give a little pressure like a clutch and see if I can get any motion, not any individual time, but with each twist, if I'm clutching down on the other rod, I can see it's starting to go. So like every couple clutches of the spin, so this rod's spinning one time, and this time this rod's only spinning 0.95 times per revolution. And you can see I'm getting some twists in those letters already. Very gentle. I'm not going to go too far with this twist. And now put in as much twist as I want for these letters. So I'm going to heat one of the handles off, this one. And now I'm going to perfect my sphere from here over. So I'm going to use my graphite marble mold. I'm going to start in a hemisphere that's bigger, just a little bit bigger, and then I'm going to go to a hemisphere that's smaller, and I'm going to rotate it so I'm changing the axis of rotation. And that is going to make my marble very spherical on that side. But you can see there's a lot of ripples on the surface where the graphite pulled heat out of the surface faster than the interior of the marble. So I'm going to heat the outside to smooth those chill marks. And the marble itself is spherical on that side, so I'm going to let the surface calm down. I don't want it to be too hot when I put it in cherry wood paddles, because I don't want it to burn and stick. I want it to glide on a surface of steam between hot marble and the cherry wood carbonized layer. And let's see if we can show that. So I got a few seconds because I want this to harden up a little bit on the surface. Grab my paddle and rotate this. Change the axis of rotation. Each mold just gets a few seconds. Now, I'm going to make my last attachment handle, which is going to be glass, and I'm going to shape it down to a pencil point. There was a little crack in there, so I just knocked that off before I started. I'm going to start with one that's, I want it to be clean too, so I'm going to take the glass off the tip of that. And I want this to be the right temperature and this to be the right temperature. This will have a little melted point on the pencil end. And it'll make a little weld. Now I'm going to heat off this last steel putty. Then I've got a little bit of shape work to do on this other side. That's attached to the steel putty still. So I'm going to go and strongly heat this end and pull out the little particle of metal that was left on that little dimple. These letters, wow. Alright, now I need to heat this side of the marble, and I'm going to improve the sphericalness of this side. This side is spherical and smooth. This side is not spherical and not smooth. So let's get there. A lot of times, this one side, the first side, you won't get all the way there. And so you'll go to the other side, improve it, then you'll have to go back to that first side again. It might be 5 or 6 times passing it back and forth before you get to getting the marble as spherical as you want. And it's attaching and detaching to your marble. It's the trickiest part, and it's worthy of practice. So it's not something you want to gloss over or try to, see if you get lucky this time. It's something you want to practice until you are good at it. So you see the sphericalness has improved, but it's not quite perfect. So I'm going to do that one more time. Heat the marble. I'll go in a larger graphite hemisphere than a smaller one rapidly within like 2 seconds. Bing, bing to each one, spinning it, getting like 5 or 6 rotations in there, just the right pressure and just the right amount of spin, having just the right amount of heat in the marble. And when I say just the right amount, it's your feel, your call. Once you get into the swing of things, you'll have your own way of doing stuff. So, bigger one, smaller one. So when I spin and release and it keeps spinning, that means my sphericalness is going great. Now, as sphericals it's going to get, and there you see ripples on the surface. You can see the reflection wiggling as I rotate this. So I'm going to use heat and the surface tension of the glass and rotation to pull this. Smooth. And you don't always have to touch the glass with tools. A lot of times you can heat it, turn it, look at it, wait, go back, heat, turn, observe. The flame is your tool, gravity is your tool, this rotation that I'm giving it is your tool. You don't have to have that tool in your hand. You just have to be aware of it so that you can manipulate it. Sometimes your best tool is patience. Alright, so all the ripples have smoothed out, as far as I can tell. Yeah, looks good. Alright, so I'm going to let it settle down, cool, so it's not going to stick to my cherry wood mold. And I shake some of the water off here because I don't want it, swimming. So see that spinning really nice. The sphericalness is good. Alright, so this glass rod was our last attachment point. I'm going to come in with my glass jacks, in this case, barber scissors, chill that attachment point in a fireproof blanket I have next to me, actually a fireproof tile. Chill that area, tap it off, and then I'm going to come and get my torch and polish that last little bit. So, chill that mark and tap it off. Came off. I'm going to clean any dust out of my torch. And I'm going to pick this up and polish that little nub. And I'm heating that area pretty strongly, and then I'm backing off, letting it settle down. I want it to get hot and pull into itself right away, but I don't want to burn the glass and make it scummy or filmy, but just clean. Now I need to transfer that marble into an annealing oven where it's going to remain at about 960 degrees for the next couple hours, and then I'll turn it down in temperature slowly. So I'm heating these tweezers that I've made just for picking up marbles. I've made them in a bunch of different sizes. I heat them till they're orange, and then I just let them go black. That's the right temperature. Then I can pick up my hot glass marble, and now I'm going to put it in my oven. In the annealing process, since we've merged different glass from different rods and different colors and manipulated that glass, we've bent all the bond angles in the glass, introducing stress into its crystalline lattice. So when you're holding the glass at annealing temperature, you're holding it at a temperature where it's just under the point where it's going to change from a solid state to a liquid state. In that case, the surface is not perceptibly moving, but all those bond angles are relaxing to their natural state. The tetragonal pyramid structure with bond angles of 120 degrees. So once they do that, and then they're cooled at a controlled rate, that glass will be stable for a very long time. Millions and millions and millions of years. Or till next week when volcanoes erupt or something. The fire tornadoes come. So we're finished with that. I'm going to turn off my oxygen. I'm going to turn off my propane. You know what? I'm going to bleed my lines. So let's put those back up. Propane first, oxygen. So I'm going to turn off my high pressure gauge on my oxygen. When the oxygen comes out of the line, I'm going to turn off my low pressure gauge. It's going down now. It's all the way open. Close my oxygen valve. I'm going to turn off my propane valve in my tank. This is just a valve. Alright. And then let the tank run out from the valve through the line that goes to the torch. And when that burns free, turn that off. And now the lines are bled and the tanks are off. So that is the shutdown procedure. And that's it. I can't read the comments while I'm doing this by myself, so I'll look back on this evening. If there are any comments, I will respond. Otherwise, I will see you next week, and don't forget to go shopping. See ya.